I own a magic clock that gives me 2 extra hours per day. When I first opened the package, I was bamboozled. I found something completely unlike the product I'd seen in the IKEA store. A clock with the number 13 unwillingly wedged between 12 and 1. As I would soon learn, however, it was exactly as intended. After overcoming the initial annoyance, I hung the inaccurate clock on the wall, much to the amusement of my girlfriend, Rhea. We had a good laugh about it after work. Later, we found ourselves slumped on the sofa, binge-watching episodes of The Office way past midnight. Every few minutes I'd glance at the IKEA clock and chuckle to myself. I was bemused at the 13 numbers crammed uneasily and unevenly around the outer perimeter. Silly sardines in a tin can. There was nothing silly about what happened when the clock struck 13. In a moment of harrowing horror, Rhea vanished. And then the lights in my house followed suit, as did the lights of every house outside my window in rapid succession. I sprinted from room to room in a frenzy, calling for Rhea, but there was no answer. After 10 minutes of fruitless searching, I ran to the street. My neighbourhood had been plunged into darkness. And it was no isolated event. Even as I headed farther into the town, I found no signs of life. Not a light, not a car on the road, not a soul. I started to scream manically, succumbing to the terrifying concept of being perpetually alone in an icy, lifeless version of Earth. I truly thought the world had ended. Just as suddenly as it stopped, everything sprang back to life. I had returned home at that point, and I was sitting on the sofa, head in my hands. The lights returned, and so, most reassuringly of all, did Rhea. The horrifying hour in an apocalyptic world suddenly made sense. Time had frozen. "What's up with you? Is Michael Scott making you cry?" Rhea teased. I frantically searched for an explanation, overwhelmed with relief at my girlfriend's sudden reappearance. I just have a headache. I'm gonna head to bed. I prayed for it to be an isolated incident, but at work the next day, the horror repeated itself. I gained an hour of time in an empty world. The analog office clock froze on the number 1. I knew that, back home, my IKEA clock would be ticking past 13. The only thing, other than me, with motion in that dimension. Trapped with my thoughts in that husk of an office, I eyed the deserted city from a high-rise window. And that was when I recalled my conversation with Rhea the day before. "I love the clock, but on a serious note, you've asked for a replacement, right?" she asked. "Why? I've always wanted extra hours in the day." I laughed. Extra hours in the day. That sparked something in my mind. I remembered the employee I'd met in IKEA on my lunch break a few weeks prior. Jacob. "How does your delivery service work?" I asked. "Ah, no room in the car for everything you want?" Jacob asked. It's not that," I said. "No time." He nodded and smiled. "I used to be like you, but I found a way to make time." I always hated that phrase, making time. What an impossibility. A suggestion often spouted by people with fewer responsibilities. As I stared at an inexplicably lifeless city from my office window, encaged in that paused moment for an hour, everything came together. The mysterious man had done this to me. He'd deliberately given me the clock. That had to be it. I still decided to use the clock to my advantage. I'm greedy. I'm human. The soundless, motionless world I entered during those 2 extra daily hours never ceased to horrify me, but I saw that fear as the price to pay for such an amazing gift. A gift that afforded time to finish work, exercise, read, and so on. The true price became terribly clear after 2 hours of enjoying the fruits of my labours. The list of life improvements seemed endless. I'd been promoted to vice president of the company at which I worked. I was in the best physical health of my life. I was always well rested. I'd married. And speaking of which, I had so much more time for my wife, Rhea. But something was very wrong. A foggy truth lodged deeply in my mind. A terror that incessantly eluded me. Rhea had just given birth to our son, Bobby. Even with an additional 2 hours a day, the strain of parenthood was immense. I would get as much work done as possible at 13 o'clock, so as to carry more of the parenting burden, but it didn't seem to be enough. Rhea was tired. More than that, she was greying. I'm only 32, she groaned, cradling a silver strand of hair in her hands. I hugged my wife from behind. It makes you look distinguished. You're beautiful. Being a mother is killing me. I didn't think much of it at the time. I gained my first grey hairs in my late 20s, so I thought Rhea to be lucky in that she'd only just noticed her first one. Obviously, I didn't voice that thought aloud. But still, as the weeks went by, there was an ever-thickening cloud in my mind. It was more than tiredness from the pressures of fatherhood. I was blind to something, and that scared me. I think the clock itself was disjointing my mind. Everything became all too clear after a hospital appointment about Bobby. The boy is 3 months old, right? Dr. Hill asked, frowning. Rhea nodded, rubbing the bags beneath her eyes. Dr. Hill said. He's just so big, Rhea finished. The doctor was just as bewildered as us, and that filled me with a haunting feeling. Something I'd been overlooking for weeks on end. Bobby, Rhea, they were both aging far too quickly. I was consumed by a roaring, relentless wave of emotion. I finally noticed my wife's wrinkles, her numerous strands of grey hair. She'd aged about 20 years. And Bobby, 3-month-old Bobby, he looked like a fully grown toddler. We initially thought it could be progeria, Dr. Hill said. But the test came back negative, so truthfully, we have absolutely no idea why Bobby is aging so rapidly. In your case, Rhea, I'd say stress has most likely affected your body. Rhea and I decided that it was time to move away from the city, so I bought a beautiful cottage in the country. I planned to work remotely, as did she. Most importantly, on the day we left, I destroyed the IKEA clock. No more playing with time. On our drive to our new home in the country, time froze at what would have been 13 o'clock. My wife and baby vanished from the car, and the vehicle immediately halted. Every moving thing on the road froze, littering tarmac with ghostly hulks of metal. And I found myself sitting there, hands white-knuckling the steering wheel in disbelieving fear, as I surveyed the empty world which had been haunting me for over 2 years. Except it wasn't empty. At the edge of the tree line beside the road, a shape moved. A looming insect on hind legs, frightfully thin, blending in with the oak trees which partially shrouded it from view. Then the creature scuttled into the road, scurrying towards our car at a rapid pace. I screamed, opening the door and fleeing from the impossibly fast creature. Weaving between abandoned cars, I took a risky glance over my shoulder, screeching at the nightmarish creature with wobbly limbs. I had no hope of escaping. I thought about circling back to the car and taking my chances by hiding in there. Then I felt a sharp blade pierce my upper back. I tumbled to the gravel and spun around to eye the faceless monstrosity which hovered above me. I've never been so frightened. Not of death, but whatever torturous punishment the thing had in store for me. I understood everything when I gazed upon the creature. I knew that it was time itself, and there is nothing more horrifying than reckoning with a force far greater than you could ever hope to be. A force that views you as a bug. In my case, a meddling bug. But it hadn't come to scold me for spending 2 years escaping time. Rather, to scold me for escaping my fate. There were no words from the being to convey this fact. How could the haunting abomination speak with no mouth, after all? And yet I knew that it had come for me because I destroyed the clock. Just as I knew that its stick-like form was an illusion. A physical image conjured by my mind to prevent itself from imploding. Nobody can truly look upon time. It's not an impossibility, but a horror beyond horrors. The being left a gift-wrapped circular parcel on my chest, and I gulped in terror, knowing exactly what I would find inside. Then I watched the omnipotent insect disappear down the road. I prepared to lumber back to the car, but something horrifyingly unexpected happened. A punishment for shirking time's gift to me, perhaps. I didn't get an entire hour of frozen time. Every car on the road suddenly surged into motion. I ducked and threw my hands over my head as 2 vehicles swerved to avoid me. Rhea and Bobby. I swiveled my head to see, 100 yards up the road, our red Toyota Yaris veering towards the trees. Memories of that day are hazy. I try so hard to forget it. My beautiful wife, grey-haired and aged beyond comprehension, lay lifeless on a stretcher. The paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. A horror that, years later, never leaves me. A deep, unyielding grief. Bobby made it to the hospital and survived. A 6-month-old boy, roughly 6 years of age in the eyes of the staff. For the years that followed, out of spite, I stopped utilising the 2 extra hours. I watched my son grow at a horribly phenomenal rate. Any moments of joy were overshadowed by the terror of watching a child age more rapidly than their parent. I was haunted by what was to come. He swiftly overtook me in age, and 5 years later, my worst nightmare came to fruition. Bobby was an old man, dying on his bed in the holiday cottage that I bought only several years prior, when he'd been but a baby boy. "Dad," he whispered on that final day. "Yes, Bobby?" I sobbed uncontrollably. "You have to destroy it," he wheezed. After my boy passed, I grieved for months before I thought of that infernal clock again. The hellish thing that had butchered my wife and son in the blink of an eye. More time. What a twisted, evil lie. I'd been robbed of a life with my family. The unthinkable price of the clock was that it had, in fact, given me less time. Fueled by hatred, I rang the IKEA branch, fully intending to exact some form of retributive justice on the man responsible for my years of torment. But I received some ghastly news. Jacob went missing several years before I even stepped into that store. He wasn't an employee at the time. His family members, well, their teeth and ashes, were found in the man's living room. It's clear that Jacob suffered the same punishment as me. But what happened to him? Why did he return to the store to pass this horrifying curse on to an unsuspecting soul? So many awful unknowns. I pray the clock doesn't corrupt me in the same way. It still haunts me, but at least I have no loved ones left for it to take, and I intend to keep it that way until my dying day. I wish I had a happy ending for you, but life is seldom full of anything other than suffering. I'm not an old man, but the beauty of having extra time is that I've gained wisdom. Excruciating wisdom. Time is a horror that comes for us all, one way or another. Every time I die, I enter an alternate reality, and each fresh world is more horrifying than the last. This is likely the only existence you've ever known, but I remember a brighter life. I grew up in a warless version of the 2000s. World hunger was an ancient nightmare, a frightful fable of fictitious proportions. We had solved so many of the world's problems. Life was good. Life was easy. But that all changed for me in 2011. Cycling along a quaint country road, a collision with a distracted driver would wrench me from my beautiful life forever. I was torn from my body. I screamed into a metaphysical abyss as my soul ascended from its mangled corpse on the tarmac. In 2011, at the age of 18, I died. I have no doubt of that. Just as I have no doubt that looming, rotting, curling fingers emerged from the clouds to seize my spiritual form, only to be denied the pleasure as my untethered soul suddenly plummeted back to the ground. I entered oblivion, absolute darkness. And then, "Are you okay?" a man asked. My eyelids were unnaturally weighty and unwilling to open, and when I did finally part them, I found my soul back in its physical body, entangled with my bicycle on the road. My previously mangled body in seemingly pristine condition. I didn't see you. I'm so sorry, but I died. I croaked. The man gulped. "No, you're going to be okay. I've called an ambulance." I felt disjointed, and yet there was not a single scratch on my body. It was disjointedness of a spiritual nature, a sense of not belonging, a sense that I had unknowingly cheated the frightening fingers that were poised to scoop me up from the sky. By the time the ambulance arrived, the driver had unmarried my frozen body from the bicycle wreckage. I could move, but I hadn't. There was too much terror to process. I dreamt it, I thought. I didn't really die and leave my body, don't be stupid. The driver, racked with guilt, followed us to the hospital. He and I seemed equally shocked by not only my survival, but my apparent lack of injuries. After undergoing various physical and psychological checks, I was given the medical all clear, but the driver protested relentlessly. "It was a head-on collision," he said.
The kid flew into the air. You saw the wreckage. His bike is non-existent. Check again. You've missed something. A head injury? Something. One of the doctors attempted to calm him down. Mr. Dale, I appreciate your concern, but Finn has sustained no injuries. This is a good thing. Nobody's hurt. Meanwhile, I was observing the hospital environment from my bed, with that returning sense of disconnectedness. Things were different. The machinery in the hospital looked less advanced. People's clothes looked dated. But it wasn't until I returned to my family that the horror truly revealed itself. As I stepped into unfamiliar surroundings, I realised that I was not home. "I've made spaghetti for dinner, Finn," Mum said. I nodded slowly, transfixed by the kitchen television. It depicted a horrifying scene of misery and destruction in the Middle East. I thought it to be a film until I saw the news logo at the bottom, and that was when I understood what I was seeing. War. Something I had only ever seen in history books. Something that the world had mostly quashed with the unification of religions and nations in the 1800s. The URN. An event that I would learn had never happened. "Switch on to something jollier, Dave," Mum said, noticing my distress. I immediately ran to my room to research the atrocity that had evoked a nonchalant reaction from my parents. How could they be so unfazed by what I assumed to be the first war in over a century? The surprises didn't cease there. Atop my bedroom desk, there sat a mobile phone which looked like something from the 80s. My version of the 80s. And the internet was far more primitive than I remembered. My palms began to sweat, and that only worsened as I read about the numerous wars that had plagued the world for a century. Thankfully, some strides had been taken in resolving conflicts, and widespread hunger had been eradicated in the late 90s. But the timeline was still wrong. Terribly wrong. And this wasn't even your reality. It took years for me to adjust to a world with so many historical variations. I kept the truth a secret from my family and friends. I feared that I'd be committed to a psychiatric ward if I were to reveal what had happened to me. And maybe I would have agreed. I think I might have eventually chalked it up to a mental health issue if it hadn't been for my second death. December 11th, 2022. I was on a plane that crashed in the English Channel. I died. In the bowels of the ocean, my disembodied spirit sank with the fragments of an aircraft's carcass and numerous ghoulish spectres of deceased passengers. And from the darkened depths of that watery graveyard, I saw familiar fingers reaching towards me, as if greeting an old friend. I feared what that terrifying giant had in store for the soul that had eluded it, cheated it. And those awful appendages seemed angrier this time. But then, yet again, my soul was torn away. I rose through the water and reunited with my body at the surface. I found myself floating at sea, but there was no plane wreckage in sight. Only the cliffs of Dover in the distance, and so I swam towards them. But the world I found upon reaching the shore was even more terrifyingly different from the one I had left years ago. It was your world. Everything has been corrupted here. Senseless death and destruction. A world on the brink of self-inflicted collapse. And nobody cares. The people here are shells. They terrify me. I used to fear the shadowy hand that craved, and still craves, my soul in all universes. Now I fear the deeper level of horror that the next reality brings.
"911, what is your emergency?" "I'm lost." "You're lost?" cold. Really cold. What's your name? Brian. Brian. And how old are you, Brian? Do you think I'd be able to talk to Mum or Dad? They're not here. I'm lost. How did you end up getting lost, Brian? I woke up here. And what does here look like, Brian? It's a dark room. Really dark. I don't know, I'm shining my phone light, but it's too dark. The floor is hard, it smells. There's a brick missing in the wall. I see grass. I think I see a red maple tree, but shadows keep blocking my sight. A red maple tree? Wow, you sure know your trees. There are lots of them in my town. Grandma likes them. Good work, Brian. You could still be nearby. Okay, well, let's work backwards. Perhaps you can tell me where you live. I'm not supposed to tell strangers. I know, but I need to ring your mom and dad, Brian. I need to let them know that you're okay. They'll be worrying about you. Do you know how I might be able to reach them? My name's by the way. They're not alive anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. Who looks after you? Grandma. Okay, how would I reach Grandma? What's her address or phone number? I don't know. Do you know the town? Oh, yeah. We live in... Well done. That's quite far away from here, but don't worry. I'll need Grandma's name to find her address. I just call her Grandma. I don't know her name. Sorry. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry. What's your surname, Brian? Thank you. They're looking for her now, okay? Okay. I'm really scared. Well, it was very grown up of you to ring us, Brian. I'm going to need you to carry on being a big boy and help me out, okay? Okay. Starting from the beginning. What's the last thing you remember before you woke up? Were you with Grandma? No, I was walking home from school. On your own? Timmy was with me. What's Timmy's surname, Brian? Thank you. That'll really help us, Brian. You're doing a fantastic job. What happened to you and Timmy? He went around the corner and vanished. And then what happened? I spent a few minutes searching for him and then I heard rustling in the bushes by the road. It was a man, an old man. Do you think you'd be able to describe him? He had a black coat. Okay. Anything else? I don't remember. You found me? I watched the show with cops who could find people through phones. We've tried to triangulate the call, but we've not been able to pinpoint your location. Oh, okay. You know, it looks really windy out there. Brian, one of our officers just spoke with your grandma. She said you've been missing for 5 months. But I only just woke up. Do you remember what happened before the dark room? Do you remember any other place in which you might have stayed? But I was walking home from school yesterday. Brian, you and Timmy went missing 5 months ago. I want to go home. I know, Brian. I want you to come home too. Do you think you could be brave for me and look around the room with your phone? Maybe. It smells. I know, but it might help us. Especially if you could get a better look through that gap in the wall. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Remember, I can't see what's happening. You'll have to keep me updated as you move. I'm shining my light around me. There's a locked door on the far side. I tried opening it earlier and the smell's getting worse. It's getting... Brian? Are you okay? It's wearing Timmy's clothes. What do you mean, Brian? There's a skeleton on the floor and it's wearing Timmy's clothes. Okay, stay calm, Brian. Please stay calm. Officers are searching the road on which you went missing. Are they gonna find me? Yes, Brian. And it won't take 5 months. I promise. Is there anything else in the room that might help? The gap in the wall, maybe? Would there be any way for you to escape? It's only missing 1 brick. I can't fit through there. Okay. Can you see through it? Let me get closer. I'm shining my torch. Too small. I can just see grass and the red maple tree. Everything's so weird out there. It keeps getting really dark. What do you mean, Brian? It's hard to see things. It's really windy. Oh no. I have to hang up. I don't want him to find my phone. 911, what is your emergency? It's me. Who is this? It's Brian. Where's... 1 second, Brian. Brian? Hi. Are you okay? I turned off my phone to save my battery, but I think he knows I have it. What happened, Brian? He said he knew I'd been misbehaving, and he didn't mind, but he'd have to slow the world down. Then he hurt me. He cut the skin off my feet. He made me watch as he put it over Timmy's bones. Brian, he said he's going to save my prettiness because time is ugly. He said a little thing like me couldn't understand time because I've not spent it. I'm scared. We're going to find you before he can hurt you again. I promise. It's been days. Where are you? You said you'd find me soon. Brian, it hasn't been days. We were just talking on the phone an hour ago. No, we weren't. I don't know why you keep making things up. Brian, you've experienced a horrible thing, and I think this room is evil. I haven't been able to sleep. It's always light outside. Can you see the maple tree? Yeah. It's not windy outside anymore, it's just calm. Sunny and calm. All day. Every day. I don't think that's the sun, Brian. Especially not at this time. It's almost night. But it's so bright out there. I can still see it. The maple tree. Listen, local officers have been scouring every inch of your hometown. They're certain that they're getting close. The man in the black coat, he doesn't feed me very well. I ate a sandwich yesterday, but I'm so hungry. He said he'll keep me just about pretty enough. Brian, I've just been told something that I don't quite understand, and oh no, he's back. I can hear him. 911, what is your emergency? It hurts. But, Brian, he took the skin from my hands. It hurts to hold my phone. He said we still have a long way to go to make Timmy pretty enough. Brian, I don't understand. You shouldn't be. The sun hurts so much. Why won't it set? I don't know, Brian.